Hello, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, where we're solving the mystery of August 16th, 1977. And in this episode, it's Elvis, bound by chains of love. Today, together, we're going to trace the golden links of a love that sought permanence. Elvis, bound not by fame, but by the chains he forged in longing. Hi, Keith, TCB from Georgia, and Keith's giving us a TCB from Jersey. Hi, Colleen. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you both. So if you were here for the last episode of the Mystery of August 16th, we're trying to get through one of those really long newspaper articles. It's the most famous article of its time. We're about halfway through it, but we're going to take another little break from it as one of Joyce's friends, and Joyce is our fictional Elvis fan who lives in Memphis. She's gathering all this information for us from the newspapers, from television, from the radio, and from the fan network. And they've been bringing her pictures and showing her different things. And today we're going to see yet another one of those pictures, another one of those things, and again, it's going to be connected to Ginger Alden. Hi, Marion. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So, in the last episode, we saw a very special gift that Elvis gave to Ginger. And over the last several episodes, we've seen 4 different gifts. So this will be our 5th gift that we're going to see today that Elvis gave Ginger. You know, and they were really together from the end of 1976. There's this very specific date in December of 1976 when you could say they kind of became official, because that's the day that Linda left. But he'd known her just slightly before that. But all together, weren't together really a year. So this is already 5 gifts that we've seen that were sometime in that year. And yes, Elvis was an extravagant giver. But every one of these gifts, just like all of his gifts, they all have purpose. They all have a reason. A lot of people would like to dismiss who Ginger was in his life, but we've seen through some of these gifts already that she was a special person and that he was interested in attracting her. And something that we should remember about Ginger is that she was 20 years old. Elvis was 42. So Elvis, he talked with his cousins, Billy and Joe Smith. And he told them about doubts that he had. He talked with some of the other guys. He talked with them about doubts that he had. He made statements like, I'm not really going to marry this girl, even though he had already proposed to her. And she had accepted, and apparently felt like they were making plans to move in that direction. Now, Elvis had perhaps the good fortune that a lot of us don't, that you know, in this day of artificial intelligence, any of us could go out onto the internet and find one of these AIs, and we could tell it about one of our problems, and it'll give us some kind of advice. It'll be a sounding board of some kind. Might not be good advice, but it will talk back to us. And we've maintained that privacy of thought, right? We haven't told another human being about it. We haven't bared our souls to anyone. Elvis had very close friends, more close friends than probably any of us have ever had in our lives. And Billy and Joe Smith were very close to him, as well as some other of his inner circle. And he felt like he could tell them his inner secrets, just as if one of us was talking to an AI today. Not saying that Billy and Joe Smith were AI or that they only had the intelligence of AI. It's just that he had the good fortune to have a live sounding board, someone who could respond to him, someone who could let him know whether his thoughts were crazy or not. And I'm sure they responded back that they'd have doubts too, because there was quite a gap in the age in the relationship. But the other thing about Ginger, and it's what this scarf represents, because when he gave her the scarf, he brought her into his circle of fans, the ones who loved him from the first moment that they met him, or they heard him, or they saw him in a movie. That group of hardcore, loving Elvis fans, mostly women at this point in time, mostly middle-aged women, because Ginger wasn't really a part of that. She was a child when Elvis really hit it big. He wasn't as important in her life as he was in women that were about 10 years older than she was. She came to Elvis not as a fan of his stardom, and not as a fan of himself, of Elvis as the man. She didn't really know anything about Elvis the man. She really met him for the first time upstairs at Graceland. Now, she'd met him once before when she was a child, but for all intents and purposes, she really met him that very first time up there at Graceland. And then she started to know him, but she wasn't there as a fan. And so she represented something to Elvis immediately that he could not get through a fan. And that was, if Ginger would love him, she would love him for himself, which is something that he expressed to others, like his cousin Donna Presley, that he could never be sure of in another person, because maybe they'd want him for his money, or maybe they'd want him for his fame, or maybe they'd want him because he was Elvis. But this girl seemed to not be impressed by any of that, at least not a lot, and not at first. So let me just go through the comments here and welcome some other people. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here, too. And Keith's saying, I just wanted to say real fast, for EP being with Sheila Ryan, she certainly knew a lot about him, and she also knew he was very sick as well. And she knew that she was number 2 to Linda. Yeah, we haven't really got into Sheila yet. We did look at some things that Elvis wrote in a book, and that book was, he did give it to Sheila. So she was important to him. And something that Billy Smith has said quite often, which is absolutely true about Elvis, and that we should all also understand, is that the women in his life, he loved every one of them. Every one of them that he gave a gift which said that he loved them, he really meant that, especially in that moment. But he did love these women, just as he loved all of his friends and all of his family. But he did have very special feelings for each of these women. Hi, Regina. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. All right. So we've seen the scarf. And we've seen that it brings her into a circle of people that love him, but not a circle that she was already in. And it gives her a reliability that he doesn't find with other people. Hi, Sam. Thanks for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So let's take a look at our next gift that Ginger was given, and it's this Indian shirt. We've seen it before. Native American symbols all over the shirt. Indian chiefs in headdress. It's representing Elvis as a person off of the stage. His dreams, his desires. It's something that he's given to Ginger to bring him closer to her. And then he'd given her this very simple anklet that had his initials so that he could be with her all the time. It's one of these pieces of jewelry that you might put on and never take off, or that you at least would wear out into public every time you went, and people would probably never know you had it on if you had pants or a full-length skirt on. but it was a very, very personal piece. And Colleen's saying, I can't imagine how hard it was for him to always wonder if women and friends were there because they truly loved him or just because he was Elvis. That's right. And that started in 1957. Now, I'm sure it started slightly before that, but by the Christmas of 1957, it was weighing heavily on his mind because he brought his cousin Gene Smith, into his bedroom, and he talked to him, and he told him how much he loved him and gave him a Christmas present, which was, I think, money in an envelope. And he said that he had to, somebody had called him downstairs. He had to leave for a second. He said, wait here for me. And on the bed, he had a bunch of cash laid out. And when Gene saw that cash laid out on the bed, these $100 bills, big, a lot of them, and they were spread out, be very easy for someone to take one or two or three and nobody to really know who took it or where it went or to even notice immediately that it was gone. But Gene knew that Elvis knew exactly how much money was laying on that bed and that this was a test to see if he was loyal or not. And he didn't take any money. But he also knows that Elvis brought other people into that bedroom that day. And that money was laying there on the bed and that Elvis left the room. Like each one of them left him in the room for a little while. So as far back as 1957, and for him to run that kind of test, this was on his mind. He already knew it. And he lived with it until he passed away when he was 42. And Marion's saying that she believes that he loved his girlfriends because he was full of love. And I would agree with that. But this piece that he's given to Ginger, this anklet, this is very personal, and this shows a desire on his part. This isn't just a casual gift that he would give to any woman. This is something that's special, even though it's unadorned, which is perhaps the most special part of all, because you don't really think about Elvis Presley unadorned. And then, yes, in the last episode, we saw this silver leather jacket with the hand-painted rainbow flames, and it's got a giant hawk on the back, as if it's protecting Elvis. It was a kind of an armor that he wore out into public when he wasn't on the stage, but so that he could still proclaim to the newer crowds that he was still the king of rock and roll. And he gave it to Ginger, and then we found out that it had really been given to him by Linda Thompson, his previous girlfriend, and that it represented to him a time when he and Linda were together. That was like his golden age. It was like the perfect time. It was that first year or that second year that they were together. It's probably what it reminds him of. But the moments that he had this jacket, and she wore her matching jacket, they were special to him. And even though she was gone, he wanted to recapture those feelings, even if it had to be with somebody else. And he took this jacket and he transferred those feelings over to Ginger. And he said that you can be the vessel that holds my love if you wish to be. And he didn't say that with words. He said it with these gifts. And these aren't the kind of things that you'll find said in any books. They're not going to be in any television shows or in the films. Because they don't bring it down to these kind of pieces. These very intimate gestures that Elvis made with the possessions that he owned. And that he gave to the people in his life, which then tied them to him in some way, even if it was just to mark a point in history, a very special moment. And now we come to the gentleman on the screen, and his name is Lowell Hayes, if you've never seen him before. And he was a jeweler And he did a lot of business with Elvis Presley, made him a lot of special pieces, worked in Memphis. So he was the local Memphis guy. In the 1970s, when Elvis needed a piece of jewelry in Memphis, he went to Lowell. And sometimes he took Lowell on tour with him. And Lowell would bring his briefcase full of jewelry, and every once in a while, Elvis would go on a spending spree and start handing out jewelry to everybody. But he had Lowell make him a lot of custom pieces. And that's why Lowell's in this story, because he made a very special custom piece. And Ann is saying it's amazing that he did that test of trust in 1957. I wonder who flunked the test and what he did about it. Well, those would have been people that just quietly disappeared out of the story. And there are people that quietly disappeared. We don't know exactly why. And I don't want to name any of them in connection to this test of trust, because I don't know that he got rid of anybody because of this particular test. I just know that there are a lot of names that a lot of people don't know that are connected to Elvis. And, they're with him for various periods of time, but being with Elvis was very, very tough. It was a very tough lifestyle, especially if you weren't the Elvis. You know, Elvis had it all special, and you had it special with him, but it was tough. And that makes you also understand, you know, the strength that Elvis had to get through this year after year after year. He was the only one that lived his life every single day. All the others fled and ran for some period of time, even if they returned. I mean, like, you could look at his cousin Billy Smith or Gene Smith. They couldn't hack it the whole time. Red West couldn't do it the whole time. Sonny West couldn't do it the whole time. They all took breaks and vacations, and Joe Esposito was gone for a while, and Marty came and went, and George was never really there because he was off on his own career. So these guys couldn't do, like Keith's saying, Elvis 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They couldn't do being near Elvis 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, let alone being Elvis. I mean, so I think in some ways it went to their heads, and they kind of felt like they were equal to Elvis at times. But when you look at what he was doing, the only person that could have possibly come close to being Elvis, or, you know, as energetic and putting forth as much effort and being there every single day, is Vernon or the Colonel. It's really just those two guys. And even Vernon had a couple of breaks, but they were kind of self-imposed because of his relationship to Dee. And the Colonel wasn't around every day. He was just working on stuff every day. So to keep up the emotional support for Elvis, that was a whole different job. Even Vernon wasn't doing that. So there, you know, these people did things that a lot of us just can't understand because we've never lived this kind of lifestyle, or had that pressure on us that we really can't trust a single person. And so those that we do, we trust intensely. And we've tried to surround ourselves with a whole bunch of those people. And it turns out that over time, you know, nobody's perfect. And Colleen's saying that she thinks he probably forgave them if they didn't pass the test in 1957. And just told them they need money to just ask. So the way that I see it, Colleen, is that you can kind of picture, and I really need to make this graphic to make this better, but if you've ever seen the Brady Bunch, you know, and you've got this grid of people, a 9x9 grid, 3x3, that makes 9 total squares. And the square in the center is Alice, the housekeeper. Well, if you replace her with Elvis, and then see that circle around him as the inner circle, and then put another circle around it as the second circle, and then another circle around it as the third circle, I think he had about 5 or 7 circles altogether. And what his inner circle, it switched in and out. Sometimes you were in the inner circle, sometimes you did something like you didn't pass one of these tests, and he moved you to the second circle. and then eventually, quietly, unless it was something huge and in his face, he'd move you to the third circle. And then eventually you go out to the fourth circle, which was something like the fans at the gate circle. That's about the amount of trust you had. And then eventually you just made it out into the world and he let you go, set you free. But you really had to work at it to be in that inner circle. And you had to maintain that loyalty all the time. So, like, at the end, I would say that Joe Esposito, although he had once been in the inner circle, was actually a second circle guy. He might have been an inner circle because he was extremely dependable. But he had failed a loyalty test a few times. And so he might have been in the second. Or the other way I see it is that by the end, everybody from the first circle was gone. And he had nobody to replace some of these people. And he had to move in people that were really second circle material. Kind of like when you're playing football and he loved football and your main quarterback gets hurt, you got to throw in the second stringer. Doesn't matter that he's the second stringer, he's got to move up. So I think there was a dynamic like that moving around him all the time. And you could map his life out that way. Like in early 57, the inner circle would have been radically different than it was in 1960 when he returned from the army, which was different than it would have been in 1965 or 1968 when he did the special, or 1969 when he came back to the International. These people kept moving around. Only Elvis was always there. And the Colonel and Vernon. But I've gone on a long time about that. Let's get back to the main focus of the show here, which is what Lowell, who's on screen, made for Elvis. Elvis commissioned a special piece. And it's up on the screen now. It's a gold chain. And in the final year of his life, Elvis commissioned a custom-made 14-karat gold waist chain for Ginger Alden. So this was to fit around her waist, just above her hips, inscribed with the words, "My love, my life." The phrase itself, 3 inches wide, half an inch tall, it reads like a benediction, a sacred seal of devotion crafted by his personal jeweler, Lowell Hayes. The chain spans 25 inches and was designed not merely as an ornament, but as emotional infrastructure, a wearable golden vow inscribed in the language of permanence. What makes this piece especially mythic is its echo, because years earlier, just a few years earlier, probably about the same time as the jacket, Lowell Hayes had welded a similar chain around Linda Thompson's waist. Elvis had brought her to Lowell, and he had actually permanently affixed this chain around Linda's waist. A gesture of permanence, intimacy, and symbolic binding. And with these chains, Elvis wasn't just giving gifts. He was inscribing relationships into gold and ritualizing his love through repetition and craftsmanship. So he had used this chain to show his desire for a permanent love with Linda. Things had not worked out between them. She had gone her own way. And now he was offering that and trying to bring that same memory back, that same feeling with Ginger. Hi, Carolyn. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So, I think this chain is really amazing because it's an even more intimate gift, I think, than the anklet. Now, you ladies, let me know which is the more intimate gift, the anklet or the belly chain. And did you have any idea that either of Elvis's main girlfriends, Linda Thompson or Ginger Alden, wore a belly chain that Elvis had gotten them, or that Linda's had been permanently attached? And Marion saying that the chain is so beautiful and speaks of lots of love. And this chain is also a portal, because we can see through it, and we can see Elvis's yearning for a lasting connection. Through this chain, we can see the mythic choreography of his romantic gestures. That he has a stylized, mythical idea about love. And he's repeating these gestures to try to get this love right. To try to get it the way that his dreams say it's supposed to be. And which he almost found with Linda, but that somehow it got away. Hello, Roy. Thanks for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Roy saying that he's never heard of this chain before. Glad to hear that, Roy, because it means that I'm bringing new content to the Elvis community. Things that Elvis fans haven't really seen or thought about before. Things that tell us stories that we don't have to depend on the words of others and their opinions. This chain isn't an opinion. It's a fact. Elvis commissioned this. He didn't just go out and find this chain. He had Lowell Hayes make it special. For Ginger. Especially for Ginger. Now, is that something you do for a woman that you don't plan to have around for any length of time? Or is that something you do for a woman that you have deep feelings for, and you're hoping that she returns those feelings? Because for the first time since he'd been in high school, at least the first time since 1956, he's met a woman who he has to work. He has to work to get her to like him. He can't be sure of what she thinks when he looks at her. She brings that same feeling back that Dixie would have brought to him, or Barbara, his early girlfriends. He couldn't just count on being Elvis with them and, you know, that smoothing through everything. He couldn't even really count on that with Anita. So this is not, and Anita had that same quality that she wasn't really his fan when he met her. So these are the kind of women that he seems to form the deepest and best relationships with, because Linda Thompson was also not really an Elvis fan when she met him, although she was definitely aware of who he was, just like Ginger was. And through this chain, we can see the emotional architecture of his final year, because he commissioned this nearly identical piece for Ginger. It's almost identical to the one that he had had for Linda. He wasn't just repeating himself. He was attempting to carry forward the emotional resonance of that prior bond and to preserve the architecture of love that he had once felt was whole, the scaffolding upon which he had built his tower of love. Is that it was as if he was trying to summon the ghost of a feeling to weld his memories into this gold and to make that past live again through ritual repetition. Because sometimes, if you can repeat an action of the past, you can bring back that old feeling. Something like, if you're in a poor mood and you smile, there's a good chance you might start to feel happy, just because you're going through the physical act of smiling. And Colleen saying that didn't Elvis say that Ginger's eyes reminded him of his mother? I believe that he said her whole face reminded him of his mother, that when he looked at her, he saw Gladys. And I think that was extremely important to him. Because I think when he looked at Priscilla, he also saw Gladys, but not in a physical, similarity. And the fact that she was a mother and the mother to his child, he saw the spirit of Gladys in her, even if it wasn't there. And in Ginger, he saw it in her face. So and I believe he saw it in some of her actions. You know, that there were ghosts of the way that maybe Gladys would say something or think about something. And that was part of what attracted him so much to her. But I think it's also got to be that she just didn't fall blindly in love with him or declare her devotion immediately. You know, she was a prize to be won, not something that he already had. And so I think this piece is really important. And I think that when you put it together with the other pieces, you know, it forms a story, a pattern that we can see that Elvis gave her gifts that touched different portions of her and portions of her life, and that he had given her pieces that would hopefully be with her all the time so that he could be with her all the time. And now, from the archive, we'll pull out another picture. And this is Donna Presley. This is Elvis's cousin. And in this picture, she's wearing this beautiful necklace of a peacock, which really reminds me of the peacocks at Graceland. And it also matches with all the blue that she is wearing. But I'm bringing her picture up because if you don't know Donna Presley, she is a very sweet and wonderful person. She is Elvis's first cousin. She is the daughter of Nashville Presley, who is the sister of Vernon. So Elvis's aunt, and Nashville, who normally went by the name Nash. She was Aunt Nash. She was 9 years old when Elvis was born, and she lived in the big house right next to the house that Elvis was born in. So she would play with Elvis quite a bit. And she loved holding Elvis as a baby, but because she was 9, they had some hesitation about letting her just play with him on his own. So she kind of grew up into responsibility caring for Elvis. And they would play church together, where they would take a bunch of sticks and put them in the yard. And that was their congregation. These sticks would be in rows, like they were sitting in pews. And then Nashville would preach to the congregation. And Elvis would stand to the side, and then he would walk around and collect the offering. And when he decided that the sermon had gone on long enough and it was time to go on to something else, he would pick up all the sticks out of the yard and throw them as far as he could. And that was the end of church until the next time they played or Sunday rolled around. And Marion's saying that Donna has her own channel, and that's exactly why I'm bringing her up here. So that we can all be aware that Donna now has a YouTube channel. And she's going through a hard time right now because of some other YouTube channels, which I'm not going to talk about. Other than to say that she doesn't deserve the vile way that she's been treated by them, or the things that they've said about her. And I'm going to give out a link right now into the chat so that you can find one of her videos, her most recent videos where she answered questions, and she's asked that people send in more questions. And so I would encourage you to go watch Donna. Put some questions in there. Let her know that you support her. Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So Donna, when she was 17, she moved onto the Circle G Ranch because Elvis bought it in 1967. And he started moving friends and family onto it so that he could have employees to, they had a bunch of cows and horses that needed to be watched after. And he had various people that lived there, but one of them was Earl Pritchett, who was Donna's father and married to Nash. So they all lived there together as a family in one of the trailer homes that Elvis bought. And Elvis and Priscilla, and someday I'm going to do this story in a much better fashion, but with a lot better pictures and stuff to show you guys. But just a quick story here. Elvis and Priscilla moved into the cottage it's a little small house that was already on the property. And that's where they had their honeymoon, about 4 days after their wedding. But Elvis, after hanging out at the trailer homes that he bought for his friends, and in these trailer homes, everything was brand new. And Elvis had never once lived in a house where everything was brand new. Like, even Graceland wasn't brand new. It was redone, remodeled, but it wasn't new. Even these wonderful hotels and stuff that he stayed at weren't new. The only new one had really been the International, but this was before that. So Elvis he loved gadgets and stuff, and of course these trailers were full of modern day conveniences and gadgets. And he fell in love with these trailers. So he bought one for himself, and he moved him and Priscilla into it. And then about 8 months later, the dream was over. He had to go back to work, and reality just kept crashing in, and he decided not to keep Circle G, and he sold everything that was on it. And then he spent Christmas there, but he'd sold like basically everything that had to do with the ranch. So they rode some horses and they had some fun over Christmas, but that was really the goodbye. And then Donna and her family, they moved onto the Graceland property into the trailer home that Priscilla and Elvis had lived in at Circle G. So Donna grew up in her last few years of being a teenager, 17, 18, 19. I'm not exactly sure when she left home, but she grew up in those few years right there at Graceland. And she got to see Elvis quite a bit. She spent a lot of time with Minnie Mae, her grandmother, and Elvis's grandmother, who lived at Graceland, as well as Aunt Delta. And she's got a lot of wonderful stories to tell about Elvis. You can find interviews. She's done a lot of YouTube interviews over the past few years, and all of them are wonderful. I once met Donna in person. I got really lucky. It was at Marlowe's, and Marlowe's is a restaurant in Memphis. So, Carolyn, when you were in Memphis, I don't know if you went to Marlowe's or not, but it's the Elvis hangout on the Graceland, the Elvis Presley Drive strip right there. And they had a special breakfast event where they had a bunch of different people from the Elvis world, and she was there. And I happened to be there early, fairly early. There weren't maybe 10 other people there, and she was all by herself sitting at a booth. And I got to talk to her for a little while. And at that point, I didn't really understand who Donna was. But she told me about herself. And I bought her mother's book. She's reprinted her mother's book, Nash's book. Nash's book is amazing. If you love Elvis and you love the sweet stories, you definitely should treat yourself to Nash's book. Donna has reprinted it and is selling it. I don't know exactly how to get a hold of it, but I think her website is donnapresley.com, and I'm sure you can figure it out from there. But I was lucky enough to get to meet her, and in those few minutes uh, a lot of people that you go up to in these kind of events, they're holding time. You're a placeholder of time. You're there for a few seconds, for a minute, maybe two, and then you're going to be moving on and they're going to talk to somebody else. And they just got done talking with somebody right before you. And they're kind of in this zone where, and I totally understand right where they're at, they can't remember everybody that's walked by. It's just not humanly possible. Everybody that they've met. And yet Donna, when I spoke to her, it was 100% her attention was with me. And she has that same charisma that Elvis had. Now, I don't know that she has it to the same degree, but when you are in her presence, you know that she is there and that the moments that you spend with her, she is with you, which is a rare gift that few celebrities have. Few people in the world have that kind of presence. So Donna has that. So if you ever get the chance to meet her in person, I would definitely recommend it. She's a very lovely person. So I hope you guys all get a chance to see her YouTube channel. I'm going to put her link out there one more time. And I think Carol is saying that she didn't get to go to Marlowe's. But that's okay. If you ever go back, make sure you hit it. And that's really what I wanted to say about Donna, because she's is under attack right now out there in the Elvis world, which is a terrible, terrible thing that anybody in the Elvis world could do that, or that there's other channels that are doing other things. There's a whole mess out there, but that's not what we talk about on this channel. We celebrate the life of Elvis. And so now we're going to get back to what we need to finish for today, which is this New York Times article that was written by Molly Ivan, who you can see on the screen. And we've gotten probably about halfway through this, so let me see. So we're coming in about halfway into this article, and we're at a section called Preferred Night Hours. And Molly writes that Mr. Presley also gave Cadillacs away with startling frequency. He would from time to time see some stranger, nose pressed against a car showroom window, and invite the person to go inside and pick out the color he or she liked best. Mr. Presley would then pay the entire cost of purchase on the spot. So wouldn't you have loved to have been there to at the right moment to get one of those Cadillacs, just so you could say that Elvis had bought you a Cadillac? But that did happen. Those are real events that she's referencing. And Carol is saying, man, I thought that was to buy me a coffee link. Can we buy you a coffee? No, I don't have any links at this time to send me any kind of money or any funds. What I really need help with is likes, subscribes, comments, chat comments, any of that you can do is really helping the channel. And the channel is very, very close to eventually becoming monetized, which it will. But that's not really the reason that I'm doing this. The monetization level is really just, it shows me that that YouTube sees the value in what's going on, and they're going to start promoting the channel in some way. Now, are they going to promote it a lot? No, but they will at least impress me to more people. And impressions means that when you open up your YouTube, you get all those suggestions on what to watch. I don't get many of those impressions. Like, when people open up YouTube, they don't see me. They're not seeing this channel, even if they're Elvis fans. And it's really because the subscriber level is at about 500 and I think it was at 37 today when I came in. They're looking for a minimum of 1,000 people and a whole bunch of watch hours. And I am like right there at the watch hours, which is supposed to be impossible unless you have the 1,000 subscribers. So the channel is doing great. That's what I want you guys to know, is that people see that the channel has truth, and that when they start to watch it, they tend to watch large chunks of it, because what's happening here is not happening on any other channels that you can find. Like, there are no other Elvis channels where you can find the kind of information that I'm bringing out here. Like the chain that we're looking at today. Nobody's seen this chain. It's out there on the internet. You can find it, but nobody's connected it to anything. Nobody's thought to look at it and say, hey, this must have meaning. This must have been for a purpose. Most channels are just regurgitating what's already been said and is already out there. So together, you and I are forging new ground, and we're going straight back to the source, which I think is the other big attraction to the channel. We're not relying on anybody's written statements. We're using those to add texture to understand the time period better, to find the emotional truth. But the factual truth is in the documents, and we've got to bring the statements and the emotional truth together with the factual truth to find the truth. And that's what is happening on the channel every day. And Carolyn's saying that she's got 93 subscribers. So you're on your way too, Carolyn. Hopefully you'll be up there too. I was very happy. Carolyn says she's very happy with the 93 subscribers, and I was very happy when I got to 93. I'm very happy with 537, and I'd be happy to stay there forever. But I know from seeing the other Elvis channels that there are tens of thousands of people who want to know this information, who really want to know Elvis as a person. And that's what we're doing, is trying to figure out who Elvis was as a person. And Carolyn's saying that she just started creating videos. So Carolyn, I didn't know you had any videos out there. So everybody check out Carolyn Loves Elvis Forever, because she's got some out there. And everybody check out Elvis History, which is Terry, and Just a Girl Who Loves Elvis, which is our Emma. So Elvis History, Just a Girl Who Loves Elvis, and Carolyn Loves Elvis Forever. You guys all go out there and check those channels out. I know Terry had a new one up a couple days. I did watch that, Terry. It was pretty good. About Captain Marvel. It goes into a lot of the history. And Marion's saying that she's so curious to know more about Donna Presley, and that she loves the channel. Thank you so much, Marion. And Pat's saying she's already subscribed to Terry. Thanks, guys. Let's read some more of this article. Mr. Presley was a nocturnal person who thrived when most others were asleep. Maurice Elliott, a vice president and spokesman for Baptist Hospital, said Mr. Presley had gone to sleep yesterday morning at 6 a.m. Sometime between the evening or early morning hours, Mr. Elliott said Mr. Presley visited a dentist. Then between 4 a.m. and 5:30 a.m., he played racquetball on the court of his mansion. When Mr. Presley was a patient in the hospital, Mr. Elliott recalled, quote, he would put tinfoil over the windows. He would normally not get up until noon or thereafter, and not go to bed until 2, 3, 4 a.m. So even in the hospital, Elvis was keeping some weird hours, and we see this detail about the tinfoil, which is the Memphis Mafia have also reported that they used to do that when they would get to like a hotel or a motel room, like if they were traveling on the road, that would keep all of the light out, and that allowed Elvis to sleep during the daytime. I mean, that was really the point of the tinfoil. Plus, nobody could see in, no pictures could be taken. It kept things very private. And Anna's saying, I found you from a comment on someone else's channel. So, Anna, are you saying you found Hillbilly Cat History from a comment? Or you found Carolyn from a comment? But either way, that's a good reason to read the comments. Mr. Presley's movie career ended in 1970, and in that year, he made a successful television special. Critics remarked on how little he had aged. He kept in shape for years with karate, in which he had a black belt, but his penchant for peanut butter and banana sandwiches washed down with soda finally caught up. In one of his last appearances, his trademark skin-tight pants split open. So there was a time when his pants did split open, more than one, and it had a lot to do with the moves that he would make on stage, more than, I think they're trying to say it was his weight here. And they're also commenting that when he did the special, the 68 special, he looked really good, and that nobody believed he. So the critics, even at the 68 special, were waiting to jump on him for, having aged, but they couldn't pull the trigger at that point because he looked too good. After his death became known yesterday, radio stations around the country began playing nothing but old Presley records. Mr. Presley recorded about 40 albums, many of them soundtracks of his films. They included Loving You, King Creole, Frankie and Johnny, Paradise Hawaiian Style, Clam Bake, and Speedway. At his death, Mr. Presley had been an indelible part of the nation's musical consciousness for 20 years. The funeral is being handled by the Memphis Funeral Home. A spokesman said late yesterday that arrangements had not been completed. And so this was published on the 17th, so the next morning. And of course, the arrangements were done by later that afternoon. Mr. Presley survived by his 9-year-old daughter, father, and grandmother. His father and his daughter were reportedly at Graceland at the time of his death. And then we're going to go from New York to London to The Guardian. And we've seen some articles from The Guardian, but I don't believe we saw this one. And it says, the king is dead and there will be no replacement. Elvis Presley, the founder, the greatest exponent, and the most passionate figure in rock and roll, died last night in the emergency ward of Memphis Baptist Hospital of acute respiratory distress. A hospital spokesman said Presley was found unconscious at his home by his road manager, Joe Esposito, who called the fire department ambulance. Ambulance personnel tried to resuscitate the singer as he was being rushed to the hospital, but Presley's personal physician, Dr. George Nicopolis, pronounced him dead. Thus ended, at the age of 42, the career of the man who recorded more than 400 songs, who sold more than 260 million records, and who will always embody not only rock and roll, but the sudden explosion of young white affluence which created it. He received dozens of offers to perform in Britain, but turned them all down. And Anna's saying she found Hillbilly Cat History from comments on someone else's channel. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for coming over here and giving us a chance. And Pat's saying that this is heartbreaking. And these are heartbreaking articles. But this is how the world saw Elvis the day after, and we've seen how they saw him in New York if they read Molly's article, which was the most quoted of its time, I believe. And this one, which is probably mirroring a lot of what she says over in London, although it was not written by her. Aaron Elvis Presley was born on January 8th, 1935 in East Tupelo, Mississippi. His twin brother Jesse died at birth, and his parents, Vernon and Gladys Presley, raised him in the kind of loving and religious poor white home which was the very essence of the Deep South. After winning several talent competitions as a child, working as a cinema usher, and a truck driver, the job he always said he liked best, Elvis Presley met his first inspiration, Mr. Sam Phillips, the owner of the Sun Record Company. It was the early recordings of songs by black musicians that attracted the attention of Colonel Tom Parker, who has become Presley's Svengali, guiding his career and personal life with the object of making as much money as possible. Within a year of Colonel Parker becoming his manager in November 1955, the young Presley had won his first 6 gold discs and an international reputation as the most dangerous thing to hit civilization since the atom bomb. U.S. churchmen, politicians, and Senate leaders railed against Elvis the Pelvis, whose bucking hips and passionate rhythms on stage were sending shudders of sexual excitement through a whole continent of American girlhood via the new medium of television. Worse than that, Presley had taken black songs and a black style of aggressive presentation and sold this passionate music as a neat package wrapped in his acceptably white skin. Years before civil rights legislation, and while the Deep South was still segregated, Presley brought the black man's blues to the hearts and minds of young America. So I'm not sure whether the article here is saying, by saying worse than that, if they're trying to make fun of what the people thought at the time about racism, or if the paper itself is somewhat racist in saying this. I would think it's the first, because this is London, and they did away with slavery before we did over in America. So it would seem odd that, but you know, when you try to write with sarcasm, that's not something you should probably do in an obituary that's going to be read by millions, because sarcasm does not come across well in written form, in my opinion. The songs that Presley spread around the world were hard-driving, uncompromising celebrations of toughness or maudlin despair. Just as in his private life, the young Presley regularly flattened the many men who challenged him to fight, and yet publicized his almost sickening devotion to his mother. So his songs were either masculine and hard, like Jailhouse Rock, or appallingly sentimental, like Heartbreak Hotel and Love Me Tender. By 1958, Elvis Presley had achieved the kind of international fame which only John Kennedy and the Beatles were to rival. And then it all changed. On March 24th, 1958, he was conscripted into the U.S. Army. His hair was cut, his back was straightened, and the surly curl to his lip was replaced by a bright eye and a strong chin. The teenage monster had become a doughty defender of Mom's apple pie. He married Priscilla Ballou, the daughter of a U.S. Air Force colonel, in 1967 after meeting her in West Germany while he was doing his military service. They had one daughter, Lisa Marie, born in February 1968, but were divorced in 1973. When Presley put on his uniform and after his return, the guts and defiance went out of his music. He had many hit records with medium-paced ballads like his latest Flame and She's Not You, and with very slow numbers like Are You Lonesome Tonight. To the despair of his old fans, Elvis stopped rocking and started to make bland commercial films which celebrated the wholesome, girl-loving, patriotic decency of young America. He was taken to the hospital several times because of weight problems, and as his weight increased, his public appearance became more infrequent. Sources close to the Presley retinue said he had recently been a heavy cocaine user. So in one paragraph, this article shoves in, and this is the second to last paragraph of the entire article. Excuse me. But they shove in at the very end that he was possibly a cocaine user, which isn't true, and they have no sources to back up, probably why it's at the very end of the article. And they don't name these sources close to the Presley retinue. And that he was taken to the hospital several times because of weight problems. Well, that's not really accurate. That's not even the excuses that they gave. So, the guy was fairly respectful through most of the article, and then at the very end, and kind of shoved this in. And the very last paragraph is, as if to show he could still do it, his records still crept into the charts, and in 1969, one of them, In the Ghetto, seemed to echo his old passion and to pay a debt to the black roots of his music. So that's a nasty little paragraph, too. Like, as if to show he could still do it. Well, yeah, I think he did it a lot. I don't think he was trying to show anybody they could still do it. He was just still doing it. He remained the king of rock and roll. And here is a writer, a journalist, someone who has nothing to do with music, who does not want to give Elvis his due, and writes a fairly nice article and then sticks in a couple of jabs right in the end. I don't know that was very nice. But that's everything that I have to show you for today. We've gone over our hour. And Pat saying she didn't like the nickname of Elvis the Pelvis, and Anna's agreeing, and I don't think anybody who was a fan of Elvis liked it. And I think that when they used it, some of these journalists would use it. It was an automatic indication that they felt they were better than Elvis, whether it was because he was a country boy, or because they thought he was uneducated, or they thought he was too explicit or a bad influence, or whatever it was. They thought they were better than Elvis, and they wanted to stick that nasty nickname that they made up. None of his friends made that up. It was nobody who loved Elvis who made it up. It was a journalist. And throughout this series, I think we've kind of come to realize that the journalists were not Elvis's friends. The DJs were Elvis's friends, but the journalists, they were not. And they really don't appear to be anybody's friends. They don't appear to be their own friends. They don't appear to be friends with any of the other people in the industry. They just seem to be a bunch of backstabbers. But that could just be me, and just from the selections that we've read. Like I always say, my opinion is not the only opinion. It's not even perhaps the right one. So everybody gets to have their own opinion. Feel free to put it in my comments. Feel free to put it into the chat. Make sure you like. Make sure you subscribe. Please tell someone that you know that loves Elvis. I know you all know a lot of people that love Elvis. Now let them know about the channel so that we can all gather here every day, even if they don't make it to the live broadcast. We can all learn something new about Elvis. And like I say every day, at the end of every broadcast, you all keep taking care of business.